Now, let's start with this JobKeeper $60 billion accounting error. Aaron Patrick, there is some debate about, just how massive of an issue this is and whether that money now should be redirected to casuals, to foreign students, to other people who, weren't able to receive funding in the first wave. Do you think this should be spent or saved?
Shari, look, this is a real short-term political problem for the government, but a sort of medium and long-term political advantage, this $60 billion stuff up, because they don't want to have to borrow all that money, and so they definitely don't want to start paying out across huge further sways of the economy. So you've got to say, from an economic point of view and in terms of future tax increases, they should keep the money in their pocket and not go out and spend a lot more.
Mark Latham, do you think the economy does need, extra stimulus right now, or do you think the government should hold on to this money because, there's no question there's going to be further job losses as the year progresses, and we might even go into a deeper recession?
Well, Shari, as a proportion of GDP, the Australian government and also the states have put in more economic stimulus than any other nation around the world, much more. This has been the biggest spend in the history of the Commonwealth, and there's no doubt the economy will also need varying degrees of support over the next 18 months at least. So given that the money is debt funded, you have to borrow it, you'd be better off not spending it right now because you might need it down the track. And, the other thing about JobKeeper is what else has gone wrong in this scheme? I would urge the government and the Audit Office to have a good look at it, because it's undoubtedly supporting workers in firms that are never coming back. It's supporting young people in particular who had a lowly paid part-time job and now they're on the $1,500 a fortnight. And it's supporting workers who, in some cases, we've heard, won't go to work to support that company. So it's not just the accounting error. It's got other administrative problems there, and if it does last until September, you can save a lot of money by reviewing it right now.
Yeah, what do you think about that, Miranda? And do you think, the point that Mark just made about how JobKeeper is keeping a lot of people in their jobs who, ultimately might end up losing them, do you think we're yet to see the true impact of this virus in terms of, the unemployment rate?
Oh, undoubtedly. We're just at the beginning of trying to reopen the economy and surveying the damage. But look, you'd say with this JobKeeper, this accounting error, which thankfully is in the taxpayers' favour, is just symptomatic of what we've seen from the beginning of the pandemic, with the opinions and the modelling of experts has turned out to be way overblown. In this case, almost double. And they whether it was the epidemiologists or the economists, they seem to be very fallible. And unfortunately, a lot of our society now and our political leaders regard the experts as infallible. And I think it's something we ought to remember going into the future, just how fallible they've been, particularly when you're looking at climate models, which are supposed to make us destroy our economies all over again for this phantom idea of stopping carbon dioxide and changing the planet's temperature.
Yeah, well, another issue altogether. But Aaron, in terms of the size of this accounting error, it is a very highly unusual coincidence, and it doesn't seem like we've got the proper answers here, because the size of it was what the government had estimated, would be needed in the first place. So how does that work out?
That's a really great question, and that's still unclear. Look, this has been a colossal own goal, which has worked out completely in the government's favour. You can tell that the government are relieved, because they don't have to come out with such a big stimulus package when we've basically ended the pandemic in Australia. So this is something which opens up the door, makes it easier for the Labor Party to argue that the stimulus package isn't as big as it needs to be. And gives them a political opening, which they've really struggled to get throughout the whole pandemic.
Yeah, that's such a good point. Now there's a real fight between the government and Labor about spending this extra money and giving further relief. And you're right, Labor hasn't really been able to argue anything up until this point.
yeah, we've got a really serious contest of different policy positions here. But also, we've got a coalition government which just has been hit so hard by this massive budget deficit that's going to be caused by this package, which, you know, they had no choice. They had to put in there. And I think I think Josh Frydenberg and Scott Morrison will be incredibly relieved that Treasury has made this mistake. And it'd be really great to know exactly how it happened.